So today we're going to be discussing the topic of building the perfect pitch and nurturing your media relationships. So as we all know, storytelling and media relations have become both an art and a science. And today we're hopefully going to be sharing best practice for targeting the most impactful journalists, building strong relationships with them, and consistently delivering compelling stories, powered hopefully by some easy to use data and automation tools. So today's webinar also will be recorded and shared with everyone, so don't feel the need to take copious notes or anything. But let me get on to the real good stuff, which is my pleasure to introduce our guests. So please welcome Anne Keogh, Head of External Relations at Siemens here in the UK. They're a global technology company focused on industry, infrastructure, mobility and healthcare, and they're a long-time household name around the world. So Anne's a seasoned communicator with a history of working both in-house and for consultancies, and she's been a trusted advisor to her executive team for almost 2 decades. So Anne, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this session.
And as for myself, I'm Samantha Beeks. I'm the VP of Customer Experience at Onclusive and formerly the CEO at PR Glue. So with this new Onclusive, we're integrating Kantar Reputation Intelligence, who you may have heard of. They're the largest media monitoring and measurement service in Europe, with best-in-class media relations tools of PR Glue, and the powerful AI and data science of media analytics specialists Onclusive. So hopefully this combination of these 3 partners, we really hope we'll be a global partner for success in PR and comms for teams just like yours. But let's get on to what we're here to talk about today. So let's start by discussing how to identify the authors and the publications that drive the most impact for your brand. And we'll talk about what we mean by impact as well. So we'll hear from Anne about best practices for crafting and packaging a compelling pitch. And last but not least, we'll talk about measuring success. So how do you optimize your strategies, nurture your media relationships, and hopefully how data and technology can save you a huge amount of time and just make your life a lot easier. We'll also have a Q&A session. So please submit your questions throughout the presentation by using that Q&A feature, and then we'll address those at the end. So first off, let's kind of talk about the elephant in the room. And this is a real stat. So fewer than 8% of pitches result in a published article. And it takes around about 30 pitches to journalists to result in a response. And I'm sure many people on this call will know that it sometimes takes a lot more and sometimes it never gets through. The reality is that the journalistic landscape has become totally fragmented. So everyone is a blogger today, and every blogger is a journalist today, and there are thousands of new blogs started. Communications has kind of moved on from how do we promote our story to a handful of journalists to how do we figure out which of the millions of journalists today are the ones who can help us tell our story. And to give us a bit of background, whilst we've all observed this trend, Onclusive actually did some empirical data and produced a global journalism report. Now, the facts around this tell a really interesting story around the fragmentation of the media ecosystem. So press rooms are shrinking, journalists are under tremendous pressure, so it's even harder than ever to get their attention. And some of the stats we reported from the analysis are quite telling. And here I will read because I don't know these off by heart, but there were approximately 60% more media properties globally which published content that didn't even exist 12 months earlier. So 16% more that popped up out of the blue. The total number of articles published by these media outlets also increased by 28%. So during this period, there were 162 million articles published, up from 126 million during the previous period, for a total increase of 36 million more articles, which is a hell of a lot. The average number of articles per journalist has actually skyrocketed, so that's increased by 78%. So this reflects the increasing demands of journalists as media companies downsize the number of writers they have on their teams. So these journalists are now covering multiple beats, required to deliver much higher output, not just in terms of volume, but in terms of making sure that their stories are engaging and they get the clicks and the readership. And this also illustrates as well the greater ease of publishing across these new digital channels. So what we're seeing is much more content by far fewer journalists. And this is also sort of borne out by the final stat. So over the full year, there was actually a decrease in the percentage of authors who contributed to Tier 1 publications, and an increase in the percentage of authors who contributed to Tier 3 publications. So about 15% of authors contributed to Tier 1 publications, which was down by about 26%, and conversely, 41% of authors contributed to Tier 3 publications, up from 25%. So essentially, what all of that is building a picture of is a fragmented media landscape, the emergence of hundreds and thousands more niche publications, journalists under stress to produce much, much more, which therefore leads to an environment where it's both harder to identify the people that you should be speaking with, and also harder to reach those people once you've identified them. So we all know that there's more to a perfect pitch than simply good writing, and media relations is not just about shoving stories out there to the media. So with the millions of pitches out there, it is more important than ever to break through the clutter, and doing that requires knowing your audience, being on point with your pitch, and building long-term relationships with the journalists. So understanding that audience, that fragmented audience, what to pitch to whom and what's working and not working, requires access to information, accurate, relevant information. So that means that building your perfect pitch must start with the right data and end with measurement. Now, these days there's no shortage of data, but the new challenge is how to sort through it all quickly and narrow it down to what's essential for you and your brand. And this is where modern PR technology can be a bit of a game changer. So Anne, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. As a communications person for almost 2 decades, how have media relations and pitch building strategies changed with data? Tell us all.
Well, absolutely. And in some ways, the fundamentals haven't changed that much. But what has changed is the speed has increased dramatically, and so has the scope. And we'd love to do more, but we don't have the bandwidth to do it. Creating target media lists, pitch lists, doing the appropriate research, being as thoughtful as we could be. We're being stretched at both ends. It's got to the point where we need to use the intelligence from tools like Onclusive. It's time to sharpen our swords. So at Siemens, using data and technology for comms has been essential. The right data to help us understand who is writing about what and where those articles are being published. We collect information on target journalists, and then PR tech helps us by pinpointing which information is relevant, measuring results, and even revealing untapped opportunities, such as journalists who are writing relevant stories, but not yet writing about Siemens. Tech also allows us to automate much of our day-to-day tactical work so that we hopefully can then focus on more storytelling, relationship building, and developing future strategies.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Okay, everyone. So we also, as well as loving hearing from Anne, we love to hear from everyone that's attending today. So we're going to pop up a poll now on your screens. So we'd love it if you could answer this one question, multiple choice poll, and later in the webinar, we will share the results with everyone. So yes, so I'll just take a moment there to be honest and have a go at answering that poll. Okay, so while you're doing that, let's now dive into identifying the most impactful authors and outlets. So first things first, what do we mean by impact? Because it can have very different interpretations, even within the same company and the same team. So as data science company Communications, or Onclusive, actually invented and perfected a methodology called PR attribution. And this is there to demonstrate the actual impact of earned and owned media by connecting the content published by various authors and media outlets to real business outcomes and such as standard performance indicators like website visits, signups, and sales. So using something like this, you can actually identify which journalists, influencers, and publications are having the biggest impact on your business, kind of cut through the clutter. So who's driving the most social media engagement, website traffic, brand interactions, and revenue. So you can set your impact criteria to include their recent activity, social amplification, reach, all sorts. You can also find new authors, as Anne was saying, with similar profiles who write for your competitors, but haven't yet discovered your brand. So, and as part of that, when you're looking to find authors with sort of similar profiles who are writing for your competitors or writing for topics that you want to be heard on. You know, all of this is actually possible and relatively straightforward to do with the use of modern PR technology like Onclusive. So, Anne, I'm curious to know how you actually identify the journalists and publications that drive the most impact for Siemens, and how do you earn their attention? Can you share that with us?
Yes, absolutely. It's about being relevant and timely, not wasting their time and not being too overt and salesy. For example, I mean, a key challenge for us at Siemens is that we are proactively trying to shift the perception of us as a traditional engineering company to what we actually are, which is a tech company. You may be surprised to hear that there are more software developers at Siemens than at Microsoft. So we need to talk to a much broader group of target media. And we've actually worked with Kantar Intelligence Research at a global and regional level to identify the need for that shift. And and while we're performing well against our traditional competitors like GE and ABB, we still have a lot more to do comparing ourselves to IBM and Microsoft. So it's about earning attention as opposed to grabbing it temporarily. And it, of course, that by definition is a long-term strategy. Simply put, it's about consistently giving your target journalists what they need and want in the simplest, most concise and digestible way to make their jobs easier. We do the research on what they care about and what matters to them and what they've recently published, and then we pitch stories that should appeal to them.
Wonderful, thank you. So as Anne just mentioned, once you've identified those influential authors that you'd like to pitch to, the next step really is getting to know them by spending the time to read what they've written about, listen to what they've said, note what they write about, how often and in which publications. And while this process used to be quite time consuming and complicated, PR technology such as Onclusive can actually give you access not only to the authors themselves, but all the articles and the social media activity that they have generated, and it's across the globe. So key to this as well, though, it is having access to fresh information. Technology is going to be fantastic for searching through and identifying potential authors that you may be interested in. But on top of that, you need the human curated nature to allow you to actually access the journalists' relevant details. So you've identified that they're the people that you want to speak to, and then you need accurate and relevant information so that you can appropriately pitch to them. And personally, myself, coming from the CEO of PR Glue, where we built our own journalist contacts database, it is incredible how in flux the movement of journalists is from place to place. So we make use of a mix of technology to identify the journalists we should research, and then a human team to actually make sure and do that research and present that in such a way that's useful to the customers. And from your side, what recommendations would you give to any potential people looking for a media contacts database out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's such an important part of everything we do, isn't it? So when you're looking for a media database solution, you really should evaluate how it's being kept up to date. In addition to applying cutting edge artificial intelligence tech, the best databases are curated and verified by human beings. Also, it's vital to make sure that your database is compliant with privacy laws, particularly GDPR. The days of being able to squirrel away comments on contacts in little black books are gone. So the Onclusive Kantar Media database, which is the one we use, has really helped us, and we are confident in such a crucial part of our PR toolbox.
Wonderful, thank you. So, it's time for poll. Let's see what we have got here. So, excellent. Oh, we've got some very switched on people here, Anne.
Absolutely. I quite like that some people are being very honest and have said that they have no real methodology, and I think that's very good of them to fess up on that, because I'm sure there's probably a few more as well, but no, that's good. Very helpful.
No, I would 100% agree, because we all know that just as journalists are pressurized for time, PR and comms people are also massively pressurized for time. And I think sometimes that can also explain why maybe sometimes we rely upon the usual suspects, the people that we've said
Absolutely.
these sort of things to before.
Absolutely. And I actually I find it quite interesting. That's quite a small, well, 1% have come in with having the most social media influence, because we did go through a period of quite a lot of focus on especially social media influencers. And actually, I think while we still do use them, certainly at a global level, it has kind of died down a bit, and we've kind of reverted back to the nuts and bolts. So yeah, it's interesting.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone. That's wonderful. So then moving on then. So let's talk about a little bit about what it takes to create a relevant and compelling pitch. So we've done the hard work identifying the people we want to speak to. Now, how do we cut through the clutter? So the key here, once again, is knowing your audience. So whether the story is about a product, a person, an innovation, or a milestone, you have to approach it from your reader's perspective. Why should they pay attention? What does your story or brand offer that the journalists and therefore their audience couldn't get anywhere else? And that's why we started today by talking about getting to know impactful journalists and earning their attention. And this data is essential to help focus your pitches on stories and angles that are likely to get the most traction. And based on what's worked well for our customers over the years, we found that there are also specific strategies for crafting and packaging your pitch that can make it very simple and easy for the journalists to pick up and run with, basically. So Anne, give us some of your pitching best practice. Give us some of your tips that's worked well for you in the past.
Yes, absolutely. Certainly. I love to share. To start with, I mean, I agree, a great headline is a must. I mean, journalists are very busy, and you only have a few seconds to generate excitement and be enticing enough with your email subject line, importantly, to make them want to open your email and jump into the content. You'll also want to get straight to the point in your pitch. So ask yourself, why would somebody want to find out more about this topic, and then answer it in your intro. So yeah, really hit them with the key points. And another tip is that your story shouldn't be about you, it should be about them or their readers. An effective pitch must really resonate with the journalists and explain the benefits of your story to their audience. And obviously I'd make sure that your pitch is, if you can, timely, to connect it to current issues or events or recent news statistics, maybe a new element of a story that the journalist has already covered. So it's all about relevance. Also, that taking that bit of time to personalize your pitch. You're writing to real people, so try and cultivate a connection. Personalization is not just about putting their name at the top. You really want to incorporate your insights, what you know about them, how your pitch will fit into their overall subject matter and style, and why you want to work with them. So while it does take a little bit more time and effort to truly customize a pitch, I found that it is absolutely worth it in the long term. And when it comes to packaging your pitch, quick and easy to read is ideal. Highlighting the key points so that they don't have to dig around for them or look them up. And I must say, and this is, I think that our next slide has an example, but I do find the inclusive newsroom really effective as an easy to use resource for journalists. And yes, this is our Siemens newsroom, which is run by Inclusive. It's a media-rich content hub that we've been using to showcase our communications and house our assets and our media contacts. And it really ensures that journalists have everything that they might need to cover a story. High-res pictures, infographics, all the background information, data, research, including methodology that we referred to in a release, for example. And it goes without saying that you should only use reliable research data and sources. But it's so much easier for them to receive a link to a story on our site rather than us clogging up their emails with attachments. Also, it's so easy to use that even you described me as seasoned, which was very kind, but I'm a bit of a tech dinosaur. So even I can upload and amend content really quickly at any time of the day or week without having to get web specialists involved, and I really love that aspect of our newsroom.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you, and that was brilliant feedback. Okay, so moving on then. So we've crafted our powerful pitch. We've sent the media campaign out to the world, and now what? So So here, as here at Inclusive, what happens next is really good fun. You get to measure now how your initiative is performing and decide how to optimize your strategy and what you'll do to nurture your media relationships in the long term. So whilst there are a number of ways in which you can approach your tracking, the end goal for a PR campaign measurement is to understand how well your pitch was landing, how well was it received, and how the journalists engaging with it. And beyond being able to just adjust your strategy, this step is crucial for reporting it back to the rest of the business and ultimately proving your value to the executives. So tools which include things like real-time metrics, open rates, issues, and the coverage that was actually generated by your pitch. If you can have that automated, you can quickly gauge the overall level of interest as well as the quality of the list that you've actually sent it out to. So, Anne, back to you. I'd love to get your perspective on this. What do you find most important about tracking your pitch? The effectiveness, the engagement. How do you go about it?
Yeah, sure. Well, given that most journalists will react to a pitch within a few hours of it being sent, the high-level data like email clicks on its own is very valuable. Not only have we been able to make timely adjustments, but we have also used this information to evaluate the effectiveness of our lists, determine whether our list hygiene is in order. And the bottom line is that we've stopped guessing what to do and started using real-time feedback from our audience on our campaign performance data. So, for example, to use a current example, we've got an ongoing campaign which we're having to adjust as we go through. And the campaign itself is all about cost-effective artificial intelligence from Siemens being used to help water companies in the UK anticipate where their next leak in their creaking Victorian pipework is going to occur. And that gives them time to get their engineers out to prevent sewage spills into our rivers and the sea. It's very topical at the moment, and the water companies are getting a lot of flack for these spills. It's easy for journalists to write big bad water company story, but what we're looking for is for journalists who have the interest to look into the tech solution, which includes fuzzy logic and IoT and clever stuff, and highlight that. So one thing I want to emphasize is the importance of being able to manage all of our journalist relationships in one place. This is something that is a work in progress for us. So I wouldn't claim to have best practice yet, but it's something I'm really looking forward to using Inclusive CRM for PR much more, to access all of our contacts, campaign tracking, and correspondence with journalists across our team. While all this information is literally at our fingertips, we'll be able to see and report on which journalists are getting back to us, how they're engaging with us, and what we need to do in each of those relationships. It's a really exciting time to be working with Inclusive in this way.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant to hear. So look, before we go on to the Q&A, and I can already see some good questions piling up there, let's touch on some relationship nurturing strategies that we hope will be able to get you more media placement. So look, in PR and communications, relationship building, never really stops. So here are some of the best practices we'd like to offer for nurturing your media relationships, sort of beyond that single campaign, single email touch type thing. The first thing I think we would say is to continue earning journalist attention. You've got to stay current. You've got to keep on top of who these people are, where they're moving, what their new interests are, and so on. So you need to read, they need to have access to and know their current articles, their social media posts. All these things will help you gauge what projects they are pursuing and whether or not you're kind of still in alignment to catering to their reader needs. So PR CRM platforms like Inclusive do kind of make this easy, because we will automatically keep you up to date on each of the journalists and influencing bloggers and so on. And then you can start to, you can also nurture your existing relationships with authors by asking them for feedback, seeing what's worked well, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really helpful as we continue to position ourselves as a leading tech company. There are lots of authors out there covering that tech beat, and we need this intelligence. It's really helpful.
I think another great strategy is to position your brand and your team as the trusted source of information on the particular subject matter that's within your core expertise. So starting with your brand's unique value proposition, what can you do that no one else can? Can you use that as a strategy to create thought leadership content that's unique in the marketplace and presents you as a subject matter expert in your industry. So if you think about what's in it for your audience and the journalists who serve that audience, I think that's really key.
Yeah, and just as an example for that, in the UK manufacturing sector, our USP as Siemens is that as well as selling solutions to manufacturers, we are also a UK manufacturer ourselves. So we have a really credible voice in that space.
Wonderful. And yeah, and likewise, if your company collects any kind of proprietary data that results in sort of unique or valuable insights, you can use this information to add even more value to the media relations. Or if you conduct primary research, if you collect data as part of your business that you analyze and provide recommendations to your customers, any of these things you can proactively send your unique research, your thought leadership and your industry reports to journalists so that they can so they can best serve their audiences. It's kind of a win-win. You're doing that drip feed of valuable interactions with the journalists that you want to build those relationships with, and you're positioning yourself as this great thought leader at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. We have plenty of white papers and reports. Sometimes it can feel a bit like a snowstorm. And it would be really great to nurture relationships by sharing these in a much more targeted way.
And then I suppose our sort of final thought is that, as Anne sort of said at the very beginning, media relations is a long-term strategy. Sort of building and growing relationships requires that mutual trust and respect, which is something that does happen over time. So consistency with your engagement, following up, providing value to the person on the other end of the phone, and also making sure that you remember previous interactions with them. Now, it's very difficult because what we're talking about here is potentially cultivating relationships with sort of hundreds of journalists. And again, I think that the PR CRM elements of platforms such as Inclusive can really help teams to manage that level. And then still, when they engage with the journalist, it seems like they're the most important person to you, because you remember the fact that you talked to them about their skiing holiday or their child's birthday or whatever. So the long-term strategy and having tools to support that so that you can effectively scale it, I think, is also quite key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's easy for me in some ways because I've been there for so long that I do, if I can remember, I do have this in the dark recesses of my mind. But we are working with much smaller teams now than we used to, and much more fragmented teams as well, and relying on agencies as well. So it is really important to capture that and be able to keep building those relationships and share those relationships more transparently with other people. It's not just a private thing that you have as a person. So but also the whole trust and ethics, I think, is really important. It's something we really pride ourselves on, and we've been, as a company, we've been around a long time, and we want to maintain that mutual trust and grow that into our next relationships, our next phase.
Wonderful. And thank you so much. So now we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. So if you haven't already, please submit your questions by using the Q&A feature. And let's have a look through, shall we, Anne, see what we've got?
Yeah, there was one actually, but while you're fishing through, I've got one here that's is there a best day of the week or time of the day for sending a pitch to journalists to get the most response? And I must admit, anecdotally, it was always to avoid Friday afternoons, because that was a kind of sneaky thing to be putting things out. But there is actually a recent article by PR News which has said that most reporters open the most media pitches between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. in the afternoon local time. And in addition, they open more pitches in the afternoon than the early morning. I guess they have their sort of newsroom meetings in the first thing in the morning. But most pitch or email documents occur within the first 4 hours of the pitch being sent. And 35% of journalists open pitches within 1 minute of receiving them. So so you should get some fairly immediate feedback as to whether it's working.
Wonderful. So we've got some great ones here. So are press releases still important in current PR, and how can they be used in pitches?
Yeah, well, I mean, they are, in some ways they're less important, but I do find them still very very useful, and also as a form of record to remember, so it's not all just being done sort of on email or squirreled away. That having them on that newsroom is really valuable for people to refer back to and to have as a kind of record of what's gone on. So I still think they're important, but they are. Yeah, it's the personalization and the tailoring and the targeting that we're able to do now with this data that's available. It really brings it to another level.
And of course, if you can write in the who, what, where, why format and have the print ready, print or publication ready images and infographics for them, it kind of also helps. They've got deadlines to meet. If they can grab something and they can run with it, then that's
well, the number of times that the Siemens wind power is now Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy is a separate company, but when it was still part of our sort of core group, I used to constantly have problems with journalists just picking out a picture of a random wind turbine and just sticking it on the with their piece, or maybe not even them, it would be the sub editor or somebody else. So just silly mistakes like that, and it can cause what could be a very positive piece to then be oh, that's not our kit, it's somebody else's. So it's just a no-brainer really, having all that at everyone's fingertips.
So press releases, but not in the old style press releases as tailored, part of the pitch, and listening to what the journalist needs to get their job done. We've also got here, how do we know when to stop pitching? How much follow-ups are too much?
That's a great question, and I think this is really, I think sometimes it's a bit unfair, especially if people are in agencies and their clients are screaming at them to tell them whether the journalists responded or not, and it can drive bad behaviour. And I think, I really don't follow up too much. Journalists hate being asked, have you received my email? Of course they've received the email, unless you've got a bounce back, So, but maybe it doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad pitch. It might just mean they were having a busy day. So I'd let it go, but do try again. But yeah, I certainly, as a client, I try not to harangue agents to tell me what follow up they've got done. I think it's not very fair.
We've actually built into the product a bit of an engagement score as well. So as you can see per list, how many people are actually engaging, like have they opened the email, have they had a conversation with you, and that kind of thing is because you can get otherwise you can keep banging your head against the same door that's not opening for you. A very good point here. Former journalist turned PR person, researching the readers of publications is important too, not just the journalists. Writing for a local newspaper, I couldn't take pictures that had a national angle or the readers would rebel. Absolutely. Yes, completely right.
Yes, especially, and we're always very on point when dealing with Yorkshire, because it's very specific, whether you're talking about East Riding or there's no point getting it wrong. You have to get it right.
Yes, there's a lot of pride wrapped up in the readership of regional papers. I completely agree.
Absolutely.
I'm just having a look here. To get stats on email open rates is only derived when you send the pitch out through the tech platform, correct? But how much you rely on that versus sending an email off the platform from your work address? So it is true. You absolutely, there's lots of people who send out their pitches via Outlook. There are people who send out sort of mass targeted pitches via Outlook as well. And I think that the modern tech platforms, what they do is, doesn't matter how many people you actually send it out to, it appears to only be sent to one person at a time. And you will get a lot more intelligence if you send it out from a platform than you will if you send it out via Outlook. And if you do send it out via platform, you can still send out from your own email address. So there's no break in that kind of relationship building. Any decent technology platform out there should allow you to send it as if you're sending it from your own email. The replies go to you, the bounce backs go to you. All that's happening is that you are sending it in a GDPR compliant way with unsubscribe buttons, beautiful formatting, downloadable images that they can use, and you get that intelligence out of the back of it. So I would suggest that that you should still be able to build that relationship and use a technology platform to just help you kind of scale, basically.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, absolutely. And we are in transition as well, so we're not 100% there yet, but and so we do still use Outlook, and certainly I've got agencies, PR agencies, so small agencies who very much want to send it out themselves. But the cleverness of the system is that it does pick up, it uses some clever AI technology, and it does actually match up some of the coverage, and it connects it to the release. So I mean, I think there is a transition, and I do very much want to get fully on board with the using it from the platform across the board at Siemens. But even in transition, we're still seeing benefits from the system. So is that fair, Sam?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I've got a great one here. A new PR professional and learning how to build a pitch. I've been nervous about building the perfect pitch and how should I go about introducing myself to the local media? Would you say that a personal introduction, or is it more a story introduction that's the most important thing? As in, do you lead with who you are, or do you lead with a story that they might want?
Yeah, I mean, I would be honest and brief and to the point, and so say who you are. And I dispense with the head of external relations. I just say, Siemens press team or whatever, so that they know that I'm doing it, as opposed to overseeing things, but then quickly into the story and why you think it's interesting to them, and don't be put off. I know I've talked to a lot of young people coming into PR, and I often give talks to them and try and encourage them to, because the perception is that a lot of young people coming into the industry are happier, feel more comfortable in the social media area and the marketing, marcoms area, but they really don't like sort of putting it out there with the journalists. Sometimes they can be a bit sort of ratty and sort of short with you and not as polite as you'd hope. But actually, it's so rewarding. It's such a rewarding part of the the communications mix. I love it, and you see a result so quickly, and I always think it's the best bit, really, the fun bit. So I do encourage people to try, and don't be put off if you do get somebody who's having a bad day. That happens, but it's use the tech to help you.
Yeah. You need to develop a thick skin in communications, don't you? So then we've got a great one here. We seem to be too busy to read. How does a quick point of an article surface information complete with honest data and in-depth reporting on a specific topic? This appears to be less is more, or is it? So I like this. Can you? There's a lot of things going on in this question. Time poor. How do you trust the data? How can you summarize things? I mean, from my point of view on this one, we do try to address this point, whereby we will look to summarize article information and put those summaries to use on the author's details, so that if you have time to read the articles, that's wonderful. But if you don't, it should start to surface the most important bits of the articles that they have written to give you a sense. So at least then you can create a short list, perhaps, that you can maybe then go into to further detail around. So I don't know if that's helpful, but totally understand everyone is time poor.
And I just be careful and make sure that if you are taking some research from somewhere, at least, I mean, what we tend to do is put it in the notes to editors, and we'll just put a link to the source, so that you're then not piggy in the middle. If it does turn out that it's perhaps not the best source, you flagged up where you got it from, and we're all human at the end of the day. But yeah, do try and use good sources and responsible sources. You don't want to have those battles.
Yeah, that's great. Here's one specifically for you, Anne. Siemens pitches on many topics. How do you decide your media topic priorities to pitch?
That is a good one. Well, we do try and have a plan. It doesn't always, obviously, things come in and affect the plan, but so we do try. So, for example, and we'll use external things. So if it's Sustainability Week, whilst we always talk about sustainability, but we'll try and make sure we've got some really good stuff that we can tee up Sustainability Week, or if it's about diversity inclusion, again, things like skills, we've always got skills stories, but we try and at least kind of group them or target them around particular news hooks, which is helpful. I mean, obviously there's some things you can't plan, news just happens, contracts win, or companies get bought or divested, those things happen. But it's a bit of a, it is a moving target, but that's what's fun as well. We every day's different, and it would be dull if it was a complete it was completely predictable. but yeah, we do try and keep it. It is almost impossible when you've got such a broad remit and so many different interests, but we try and at least have a bit of focus so that we can be coherent, and particularly for our executive team, that they got a sort of a clear idea of what they can be talking about and blogging about. We're always encouraging them to get out on social media and do things and post blogs and what have you. If they can have some kind of theme that they can go to, that helps, as opposed to just randomly doing stuff.
Yeah,
I did notice.
Sorry,
go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
I was just going to say that actually within the group as well, within the inclusive group, we have there's a part of our team which provides a planning grid. So what's quite useful about that is that you can create your own grid of activity, and you can have it input in with industry activity. So key events that are going on that might impact your media schedule. So sort of the planning tools, I think that there are planning tools out there, and that's one way as well of kind of helping you filter through what's appropriate and what's going to get through the clutter at different times.
Yeah. Well, and being an engineering tech company, we've got lots of engineers, process people, and they love planning and planning tools. So we have loads of them. So it's finding ones that are simple and easy to use, and are not going to cause you a load of admin hassle. That's the key to it. But yeah, no, it's a good point. I did see one question about gated, and I thought that was quite an interesting one, about having the newsroom behind a login to get a more, or equally, I think, having gated stuff. And the particular bugbear of some journalists, I think, is when you don't have any PR contacts, any a name and a number or an email that they can contact. They have to fill in a form. I don't know whether you have views on that, Sam, but I've always tried to keep us open so that they do see that we're people, local people. It's also the UK credentials is important for us, and that they can pick up the phone or email us direct. It does mean I do get some random weird stuff, people trying to go around the customer services, avoid them and come straight to me, or try to get to our CEO, which is a bit of a hazard, but I think it's important for the relationships that you are seen and act as an ambassador to the company.
Yeah, I mean, we have strong. So the having a newsroom behind so the question was, what are your thoughts about having your newsroom behind a login to get more sort of interest from the journalists, or get more of a grip on the journalists that are really interested in you? I would say that you don't necessarily need to have it behind a login to get that information. So, for example, within the platform, you can craft your press release. And I'm actually going to answer two questions here at the same time. Someone else has asked, there are a lot of lazy papers. A lot of outlets are lazy. Time press, I think we will say. And they will pick up a press release word for word, should we not sell full releases to larger outlets. And I think what you can do is, if you have your own newsroom, you can kind of be your own self-publication tool. So in the email pitches that you send out, you, as Anne said, you start off with get to grips with it, do the personalized bit. Why is this important to you? Why should you like this? So put that right at the beginning, and then by all means have everything else then that the journalist needs in that email. If in addition they want to sort of download a release, they can click on the email, they can download it from your newsroom, and all of that is tracked. So you'd be able to see which of your journalists has opened the release, which of them have clicked through to the website, be able to see from the website traffic, which of the stories that gathered most information. So I think that you can achieve all these things without blocking access, because your news also acts as just a great first point of call for the media community and wider. So I would say that you don't necessarily need to do that. And I will shush now because I can go on about newsrooms forever. Work for a government organisation having websites. Fortunately, the question, we have a lot of government organisations that have on newsrooms, by the way. Some newsrooms don't, there's a lot of newsrooms, don't put up information about individual reporters on their sites, which forces you to, some newsrooms, as in media outlets, they force you to pitch a general email rather than individual. How much less effective is this overall? I don't actually necessarily think it is less effective. So a lot of publications now, when they're putting up an editorial what happens is behind the scene, that email, and we know this from our email tracking, behind the scenes, that email address forwards to all of their journalists, many of whom could be freelancers. So the media outlets have had to change the way they work due to financial pressures, but sending to those is not necessarily behind those sits an awful lot of individual humans. So I think that's quite interesting. Examples of subject line headings that journalists tend to ignore. There are actually tools out there where you can send your email to them, and it will tell you how spammy it sounds. So
they'll certainly probably tell you to get it out of capital letters if it's in.
No capital letters, team. No capital letters. All in caps is a massive filter. Red flag for spam filters and all sorts. I know that some people would want it done that way because traditionally it's always been done that way, but it is a massive red flag, and it can sometimes block things, getting through to people, and no one likes to be shouted at. Can you think of any other subject lines that would tend to be ignored?
No, I mean, the thing that my bugbear is when a subject line isn't relevant to the actual story, and it's just like that's a disaster. So just to really try and it is difficult because it's much harder to say something in a few words than in a couple of lines. So it does require a little bit of thought, but it's definitely worth the effort.
I'm just swapping over to some Q&A stuff now as well. There was one that was very random, but it was a copy and paste from something else. The correct question is, how do you balance sending pictures through tech platforms versus your own work email and not on the platform? I'm sure this impacts your ability to get the email open rates. Yeah, it does. And like I would say, any decent technology platform out there should allow you to tailor it. So, for example, in our platform, you can send out an email that looks like this sort of beautiful branded HTML email with your logo and so on, or you can choose to configure it so it looks like an Outlook email. And I think it's not just open rates as well. The people are more savvy now. They want to be able to sort of tell you that they don't want to hear your stuff by unsubscribing, and there are a lot of sort of email conventions out there, I think, that can really help. But any decent, a decent system should allow you to tailor this so it looks like it's coming from your Outlook, if that's what you think will work best for your audience. And they should allow you to test it as well, so you could maybe send half of them looking like Outlook emails and half of them, looking a bit, more polished. So I don't think, I think you can get all the benefits of the technology without losing any of that personalized touch.
Yeah, that would be it would be a good exercise to do that. We should try that, sending it half and half and see what it looks like. I mean, it used to be much more of a problem sending heavy pictures and documents through because people didn't have the bandwidth. I mean, I think that has largely gone away now because of the, obviously we've all been massively using better systems, certainly since COVID and when everyone's been at home and all the rest of it. But even so, I think it is sometimes nicer for people to just get that link and then they can have a look and pick the picture that they want rather than having to have loads of stuff sent to them. But people are different. They will. Some people will come back and want a different picture or whatever. So that's fine.
Absolutely. And on that point, it says, have you found that embedding video in your pictures more effective in getting journalist attention? I think, from our personal experience, one of our customers that started using the platform, the first thing they sent out suddenly got, they were a transport company, and the first thing they sent out suddenly got national coverage. And the main reason it got national coverage was to have this most amazing photograph. and they sent it via the platform. People could quickly and easily download it. It was very, very high resolution, so they could use it all over the place. Now, if you have that sort of information, then it's great, and you should try to find the best delivery method for that. So the pickup there was great, just because it was quite a dry story, but the image was brilliant. So if there are any human interest aspects that you can find to your story, and you have a great one about the dogs, don't you?
Yes, and it's not a press story yet. It's just on our stories site at the moment. So we're trying to make it more, well, dog centric. I think it's basically a hydro, like a gym for or hydrotherapy unit for dogs, to help them in recovery. And of course the story will be that it's going to be available for humans as well. So that's the next sort of stage along the story. But at the moment, we've just got these amazingly cute dogs in this thing, and in this essentially looks like a kind of, oh, what do you call it, like a mini swimming pool. Yeah. So I can see it really working, but we've still got a lot of work to do on the text, because it's a bit kind of plodding text. We need to make it dog centric. So that's one in the pipeline.
But any human interest or animal interest, or something that people can relate to, and images and videos which help bring that out. It comes down to the unique content. If you can give something unique to the journalist, the journalist can then see that this story is going to get the highest clicks on their website, or it's going to get the most traffic. Well, hey, you're making them look amazing.
Yeah, and also, increasingly, I think video clips, short ones though, and with the point at the beginning. Don't wait for the end. Make the point at the beginning. But particularly with the number of outlets that have websites, so they want to put some video clips on their online versions. That they like that.
Oh, here we go. I've had many journalists complain about email attachments, images, reports. Is there best practice in making data and supporting information available to writers? Yeah, I agree with this. That's why the platform that we have built at Onclusive, when you embed an image into a press release, it's a visual link. So it's not just a little link that says click here to do this. It's actually the email that comes through. They see the picture, and there's a prominent download button available. You click on the download button, it takes you to either a little landing page, or if you want a newsroom, it takes you to a newsroom, and then they can download it from there. And that's, I think that is the most elegant way to both make an engaging communication, and then also to provide that information in a way that the journalist will use. And you can also use embargoes as well. So if you want to start sending this to people and say this is under embargo, piques interest and so on, I would say that read receipts, journalists, I would say, are a particularly, I can't imagine that they would take well to read receipts. It's like, I'm busy here, I'm doing my job, I'm not going to tell you. And also read receipts are very, very hit and miss. So I would have thought that might cause some people to get a bit sniffy. Personally, from my experience of journalists, I would think on that.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. There was one I saw about Friday afternoon or something, saying what can I say to a client to let them know that Friday afternoon's okay. I mean, just try it, I think. But maybe what I would do is probably, if I was wanting to put something out on Friday, is maybe tee it up for Monday. So say it's that they're getting it in advance, but it's actually going to be for Monday. But not necessarily an embargo, but it's just saying, I'm sending it to you in advance, kind of thing. Just but I again, there's no sort of real black and white right or wrong answers. I mean, some things do happen on a Friday, and you do need to send things out. So it's just the way of the world.
And I feel like we can end this with some words of comfort to one of our people in the Q&A. So someone received a pretty nasty response to a pitch from a journalist a few weeks ago. It had never happened to me before, and I was instructed to ignore it in order to protect my client. Do you have any advice regarding situations like this? She's so focused on leaving a good impression with the journalists. and this is very hard because you will build up your clients may come and go, but you're trying to still build up this relationship with this journalist. So I feel for you.
Yeah.
And can you speak to that from your agency days?
Absolutely, and from my own experience as well. But it's nasty and it shouldn't happen. And there's no excuse for it really. And other journalists wouldn't be impressed by it if they see bad behaviour like that. It doesn't reflect well on the journalist who's reacted like that. I mean, you do have to develop a little bit of a thick skin, as Sam said earlier, but and don't. I mean, if it was me, I would tell the client that that's what I'd had, and the client might very well bring it up or deal with it in a direct way with the journalist if they've got the relationship that they can do that. It's not a, it shouldn't be ignored, I wouldn't say, but yeah, don't worry about it. It does happen occasionally, sadly, and there's no real excuses. Even a lot of pressure isn't a good enough excuse for that sort of behaviour.
From my experience of building up a journalist relationship management tool, when you do have situations like that, it's quite often because the journalist is just massively stressed. So sometimes an email back to them saying that you apologize for causing offense, or something to diffuse the situation. But I think it is very important that it's about your relationships with these journalists, because it's your professional work. So in my mind, I think there's ways that you could go back to them to see if you couldn't establish some sort of relationship. But don't take it to heart. There are tweets out there.
Yeah, don't take it to heart, and do try again when you've got another story that you think would be right for them. I mean, there are just some funny characters out there, but there isn't an excuse for it, really. It shouldn't happen.
There are so many fantastic questions, and we will try and get around and answer a lot more of these in the sort of the summary. But I just wanted to thank absolutely everyone. There's some amazing questions there, and thank you so much. It was brilliant to hear your perspective. Let's just close. Do you have any final thoughts or takeaways that you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what I just think is it's a really exciting time at the moment, just having the data and the capability that we now have. And the beauty of working with Onclusive and Sam and her team is that they've made it easy to use, which I think is the real sort of selling point to me, is having all the data but actually being able to use it really easily. And so I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in with some of the aspects of the tech that I haven't yet sort of fully transitioned to, and I can see great scope for it, and I think it's going to really help us as deal with all these challenges that we talked about, and the vast number of people who are influencers and authors and all the constraints that we have. But you're not alone. We're all sharing these kind of challenges, and it's great to have some solutions at your fingertips.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We will be passing around a recording of this to all the participants. Thank you so much for your participation and your great questions, and we hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.